You are looking at the southern border, where over the past 12 months, there have been more than 2.5 million migrant apprehensions. That reality suddenly making the border a top priority for voters in the 2024 election, no matter where you live. And right now, you are looking live at Capitol Hill here in Washington, as in 3 hours from now, the nation hears from the President of the United States for his State of the Union address. Near record low unemployment, millions of jobs created, inflation coming down, so too are healthcare costs. Just some of what we expect President Biden to say, as he will likely exclaim that the state of our union is strong. But we do not expect the president to announce any executive actions to try to fix the crisis at the border. Why not? We'll ask the White House in moments. Come on in. I'm Blake Berman. This is The Hill on NewsNation. All right, here we go. Ahead of tonight's State of the Union address, hanging out with us today, Ashley Davis, former George W. Bush White House official, Scott Bolden, NewsNation contributor and former D.C. Democratic Party chairman, Lauren Wright, the professor, Princeton University political scientist, Johanna Mosca, NewsNation contributor, former Obama official as well, and joining us remotely, Mick Mulvaney, former Trump White House chief of staff, NewsNation contributor as well. Hello, Mick. Hello to you all. A pretty big day here in Washington. Of course, we're waiting the president's State of the Union address here momentarily. You all know how this works. Yeah, whether there's a Republican White House or a Democratic White House, you put out in advance sort of the actions that the president will take later in the evening to drive the narrative, to drive the storyline. This is what the president's doing. And this is what was announced today. You can basically get a version of this headline anywhere you look, but here's the Hill, obviously. Biden to announce U.S. military-led mission to build port on Gaza to boost aid. The White House coming out with a big announcement today on Gaza, but Ashley, nowhere to be found any headlines on the border, and we are hearing that the president will not be taking any executive actions, or at least announcing them tonight.
I mean, obviously, it's pretty tone deaf for the president not to talk about it, but I do think, to his defense, it's an issue that he's not going to win, and so he probably has nothing positive to say about it, so why draw attention? I mean, if you have a 165% increase of people crossing the border since you took office, and which totals 8 million people by Election Day, they're projecting, how do you talk about that if you've done nothing about it?
I take issue with that.
So we do expect him to talk about it, by the way. It's just not executive action. Right?
Yes.
Exactly. And the first thing he did when he came to office is introduce comprehensive immigration reform. He has been asking for more immigration judges, for asylum cases to be expedited, for more assets for Border Patrol, for more resources. So he believes that he worked with Senate Republicans to get a deal, and that is the House that spiked that deal, and so they should be the ones saying why they've spiked that deal.
The only issue with that, on the House. I mean, they should not have held up. It was the best deal they possibly could have gotten, but why did Biden remain in Mexico?
Yeah,
why did he use executive action to dismantle Title 42?
And even build the wall.
I know that's a horrible thing. Construction of the wall. Yes. Those things don't make sense, I think, to a lot of progressives or Republicans.
They may not make sense, but they don't work either. Holding them in Mexico is inhumane and didn't solve the problem unless you're going to invest in their countries where they're coming from.
2.5 million apprehensions
you increase
for the past
crime.
12 months and the
you
12
increase
months
crime on the other side of the border. It's not a long-term
They've captured
solution.
them, and they are giving them a path to citizenship and a process, but the system is overwhelmed.
You know, we argue about this all the time, but if it's gone up 165% since you took office, those policies did work under Trump.
Yeah, but they didn't solve
build the wall.
They put the problem off.
Okay, so they didn't solve the issue. So why don't the Republicans pass something to stop fentanyl from coming in the country?
Mulvaney, come on in real quick, because here was Donald Trump earlier today, I guess a pre-buttal, you can say. Mick, I'll get your reaction on the other side, but first, here was Trump.
His actions prove his priority is to import a colossal new illegal alien population and let them all stay. My priority is securing our border and sending Crooked Joe's illegals back home. It's time to tell Crooked Joe Biden, you're fired.
All right, Mick, that was the quote-unquote pre-buttal from Trump today.
Yeah, you're going to expect to hear more and more of that, because the debate that you folks just had across the panel there is the debate that they're having in Washington, D.C., which is, could Biden do more by himself, and should Congress be doing something with Biden? I think you'll see that debate continue. But I'll be surprised what he says tonight about the border. I can't imagine that he will ignore it entirely. Keep in mind, Tom Suozzi won that special election in New York, running on closing the border. And I've got to wonder if the Democrats aren't looking at that and thinking that's where Biden needs to go as well. So I'll be curious to see what he says about it tonight.
All right, well, let's find out. Joining us now, the Deputy Principal White House Press Secretary, Olivia Dalton, back here on the Hill, joining us live from the North Lawn out there on the White House. Olivia, nice to see you. Great to talk to you. As always, appreciate the time. So obviously, big night for you guys. President speaks in about 3 hours time. What should we expect to hear from him on the border? This has suddenly become the top priority nationwide for voters. What do we expect to hear from him, and why is he not announcing tonight, we are being told, any executive actions?
Well, look, the president spent the last 4 months working out the toughest, fairest bipartisan border security bill in history with Senate Republicans and Democrats. Not just Democrats, Republicans at the table. And what have we seen? House Republicans, at the direction of Donald Trump, stonewalled it. So the fact of the matter here is that the toughest, fairest border legislation in history is sitting on the table right now. House GOP could pass it tomorrow, and they're standing in the way. There is no executive action that will take the place of the authorities and the policies that would be given to the president, that would be expanded under the bipartisan border security deal. And that's a fact of the matter. You'll certainly hear from the president about border security tonight. He's promised to make that case tonight, tomorrow, and every single day between now and Election Day to make sure the American people know exactly who's responsible for standing in the way of our border security.
So I hear you say he'll make the case, and we hear this. You just heard it, I'm sure, from the panel. Some on Democrats, some on the left will say, look, pass the negotiated Senate bill, bipartisan. I hear you. When we talk to Republicans in the House, they say, you know what, H.R. 2, their bill should have been taken up in the Senate. Those are the arguments on both sides, Olivia. But when I think it's reasonable to ask, when you've got the President of the United States and the Speaker of the House, isn't it incumbent, Olivia, upon both of them to just get in a room face to face and hash out what potentially compromise could look like?
The president has spoken to the speaker. This president has met with the speaker. And you know what? They're not serious about border security. Because if they were, they'd come to the table and work with us like Senate Republicans did on the toughest, fairest bipartisan border security legislation in history. So, look, there's a deal on the table. There is a opportunity at hand. The fact of the matter is the House Republicans simply do not want to engage on this. And they're doing so because President Trump told them not to.
Laken-Riley Act, Olivia, passed by the House today. All Republicans, 37 Democrats supported it. It would require the detention of any migrant who committed burglary or theft. That illegal immigrant who murdered Laken-Riley had committed theft and then was let go. Would the White House, would the president support that bill if the Senate passes it?
You know what? The folks who are calling for this, they should really get on board with the bipartisan border security agreement. I mean, all of this adds up to a challenge that we're facing that is pretty significant in our country. The president knows that. And that is why we spent 4 months working with the Senate in good faith on a bipartisan basis to get a tough and fair deal. And the House Republicans really should come to the table on that.
I want to ask you about some comments, some excerpts that were just put out that we expect President Biden to talk about tonight. He'll say at one point, quote, "I came to office determined to get us through one of the toughest periods in our nation's history, and we have. It doesn't make the news, but in thousands of cities and towns, the American people are writing the greatest comeback story ever told. So let's tell the story here and now." President Biden, that's part of what he will say tonight. What is the story that we should expect to hear from him?
Well, look, the president will talk, as you've heard, him talk before, in major themes, defending democracy, not diminishing it, defending our most fundamental freedoms and rights, not stealing them away. And, of course, talking about the enormous recovery that we've seen over the last 3 years under policies designed to end trickle-down economics that didn't work and invest in growing our economy in ways that do, namely investing in the middle class, growing our economy from the ground up and the middle out. That's what the president has done, and it's no accident that we have 15 million more jobs than when he walked into office. It's no accident that we have historic small business starts, that we've closed the racial wealth gap to the lowest point it's been in 20 years, that wages are rising, and then inflation is falling. All of those things are a consequence of the president's calculated investment in America and the working class. And he's going to talk tonight about real policy to keep that going.
Does he have anything to prove tonight, Olivia?
I think the president wants to talk to the American people about how we continue to build on the progress we've made over the last 3 years. You know, he's going to talk about a compelling vision for our country that vastly diverges from what the other side is putting forward. And I think, you know, one thing we haven't touched on yet, but is going to be a major theme of this speech tonight, is the fundamental rights that Americans have at stake. Front and center, reproductive rights. Women all across this country struggling, suffering with the chaos and the confusion and the actual detriment to their health that has been wrought by Republicans' systematic effort to overturn Roe v. Wade and all that has flowed from that. And while the president will lay out a way forward, an effort to continue pushing to codify Roe and end that chaos and confusion, with, you know, survivors looking on, what are the Republicans doing tonight? They're going to answer that with a rebuttal from somebody who's responsible for sowing that chaos and confusion, doubling down on that extremism. And so I think that's a really important piece of this speech tonight.
We'll leave it there. Olivia Dalton, White House Principal Deputy Press Secretary. Olivia, thank you. Nice to see you. Appreciate the time.
Thanks so much, Blake.
Yep, talk to you soon. All right. What did you hear there?
Well, there's two things,
right? So there's the immigration and then what?
Well, first I'll do the reproductive rights and the women issue. She's completely right, and I completely agree that we have a huge problem there as Republicans. And we have to deal with that. On the border issue, I mean, if she continues to talk like this, or the president continues to talk like this, the American people don't understand the House not passing H.R. 2 or the Senate I mean, people don't understand that. They think the United States president of America is supposed to secure their borders.
Right.
He has not, and you can't just like blame other people. He has to take control.
Mick, is it an unreasonable question to ask why the president and the House Speaker can't just sit down and figure this thing out?
No, it's the exact right question, and Ashley's exactly right. Folks don't understand the legislative process. They elect a president, they expect the president to do something. There was some information that New York Times, seeing a poll over the last weekend that showed that on issues, specifically the border, a majority of people, 50% more, by the way, think that Joe Biden's policies will lead to an increase in illegal immigration vis-a-vis Donald Trump. That is a huge weakness for them. I'm glad to hear they're going to take it on head on, as apparently is in the speech tonight. But I think Ashley is right. I think you have to do something more than fall back on legislative process and the Senate filibuster and the dysfunction in the House. Keep in mind, most people watching tonight, this is the one chance the president has to talk to people who don't follow politics. And you can't make an inside the Beltway argument to an audience that's outside.
You are right, Mick, that this is going to be a massive audience. I think we need civics education if people don't understand that Congress has a responsibility here. But they're also right about if they just patchwork this, you won't actually be changing the asylum laws, changing the laws on how long it's taking people to be processed here. The immigration courts are just overwhelmed. We've got people here for 7 years. This is part of the problem. And so if we aren't going to see that legislation, he'd be basically patchworking it. And that is actually an argument that I think should resonate.
I want to show you real quick the other emphases for President Biden tonight, because obviously in a 75-minute speech, give or take, there's a lot in there, right? Policy emphases on tonight: raise the corporate tax rate to 28%. It's corporate minimum tax to 21%. Require billionaires rather to pay at least 25% in income taxes. Focus on consumer-friendly policies like junk fees and lower health and prescription drug costs. Scott.
Yeah, he's got to talk about those, but he's got to talk about it. I think what Biden's got to do tonight, we talk about those policies, is that it's important about how he talks about it, his energy level, and he gives concrete examples of average Americans and how this has helped them, not how it's going to help them, right? It's how he's communicating. And when he gets passionate, he starts to get angry as opposed to a smile.
I just want...
We sit here
and
energy makes a lot of sense.
We sit here and we focus on the politics, right? Yeah. And if you get outside of Washington or you just talk to your neighbor inside Washington, I think most people are going to say, you know what? I'm going to watch the clips, or I'm going to watch a little bit of this,
and
see what he looks like, and see what he sounds like. Am I wrong, Lauren?
The emphasis on his energy is abnormal to me. Even from Biden's surrogates. I mean, it's very, very tough to say you're going to see an energized, passionate guy.
That's the narrative the White House is putting out.
On the content of the speech. It almost underlines.
But normally that works. But here, when he's facing mental acuity and energy levels in the polling, he's at 36% of people.
Well, coming up.
It's got to be how he does it.
Coming up here, still on the Hill, live look at the White House. Have you ever wondered what it's like to be with the President of the United States on the day of the State of the Union? Ever wonder that? Mick Mulvaney knows. He's done it a time or two. He'll pull back the curtain. Hot mic with Mick. There he is. Oh, there he is. Mulvaney, stay on your toes. You got to be on your toes if you're around the president. Stay on your toes if you're on the Hill. No, I'm joking. Hot mic with Mick on what it's like to be with the president on the day of the State of the Union. Plus, a major fundraiser for former President Trump. More than $2 million raised last night. Morgan Ortagus was there inside the room. So what was that all about? Morgan joins us on the other side of the break when The Hill on NewsNation returns. Welcome back here to The Hill on NewsNation. Did you happen to see this? The former President Donald Trump, without even being in the room, raised over $2 million in a Washington, D.C. fundraiser headlined by his son, Don Jr. The fundraiser was attended by top Republican brass, including the House Speaker, Mike Johnson, the Republican Senator from South Carolina, Tim Scott. Joining us now, someone who was in the room, friend of the show, former State Department spokesperson, Morgan Ortagus. Hello, Morgan. Nice to see you as always. $2 million last night. Bring us inside the room. Who was there? What was it like?
Well, I guess I'm old enough now to be called top Republican brass, so I'm not sure whether I'm happy about that or not. Listen, it actually felt, Blake, like a family reunion in a good way. There were so many people that I worked with in the administration. I live in Nashville, Tennessee, not in D.C., so I haven't seen many of these people in years. And I think the key is, exactly as you said, the former president was not in the room. His son, Don Jr., and Kimberly Guilfoyle and other top, I think there was at least, I think it was reported almost 100 senators and members of Congress were there. So it was an incredibly well-attended show of support, and I think just really cements what happened this week. I know it's a crazy news week, but we did just have Super Tuesday 2 days ago. You had Nikki Haley drop out of the race, and I can't believe that happened 2 days ago. It feels like 2 weeks ago. And you had Mitch McConnell endorse former President Trump. That all happened this week, and it sort of culminated last night in this fundraiser that had top Republicans there.
How many Nikki Haley donors were there?
Well, listen, we need all of them because we are going to need every single vote in November. So, I don't know how many people donated to Nikki, but, President Trump, if he wants to get reelected, is going to have to win every Nikki voter. And guess what? A lot of people who voted for Biden in 2020 as well, who are disaffected, disillusioned by what they have to pay to fill up their gas tank and what they have to pay at the grocery store.
You are close to Nikki Haley. Where does all that stand right now? Are folks like yourself and folks who were donating her now all of a sudden saying, you know what? Time to fundraise for Trump?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think most of the Nikki supporters that were Republicans were Trump supporters as well. They just were looking for a change, making sure that we would take back the presidency. But I think Morgan's exactly right, is Trump needs every voter that he can get. But we have to remember it was 2 days ago. People that supported Nikki need to go through their little, stages of grief.
Right.
And
what
then
stage is it in right now of the 5?
Well, I mean,
somewhere between 1 and 2.
I think it's either between, if you're talking to Nikki or if you're talking to her donors. I mean, it is what it is. We've all been around this so long that it's politics, and move on to the candidate that you support in your party if you want to. But what I'm saying is people will come behind Trump. I talked to people in Massachusetts that were Nikki Haley supporters and said, I never voted for Trump the last 2 times, but I will this time because even though it's not Nikki, I cannot have Joe Biden in the White House.
Morgan, you are close with Senator Katie Britt. I think she's a pretty good friend of yours. Big night for your friend, 42 years old. She is the youngest Republican woman ever elected to the Senate. She will give the Republican response tonight. So what happens is after the president speaks, I don't know, within minutes of that, you get the other side, in this case, Republicans, to respond. Republicans chose Katie Britt, senator from Alabama. What do you think we hear from Katie Britt tonight?
I'm really excited. I'm excited because Katie, listen, this is my girlfriend. And what you're going to see about Katie Britt is a generational difference between President Biden and Katie Britt, who's obviously, as you said, only 42 years old. Listen, the thing that I love most about Katie is, first and foremost, she's a mom, right? Like, she's the type of girlfriend that I could see at Target on the weekends or at the Publix grocery store in Alabama. Her kids come first, and that matters because I think what has happened so much is that people have gotten so out of touch in Washington, and I really noticed this, not living in D.C., living in the rest of the country. You get out of touch with, what happens in a recession or what happens whenever there's inflation. Yeah. I talk about what it's like to fill up the gas tank or get groceries because it really matters to the rest of America. And so what you're going to see is a mom, the only mom with school-age children in the Senate, who's going to talk about things that moms, middle-aged moms just like me, just like her around the country, things that we care about, things that we're concerned about for our children. And I think it's going to be such a stark contrast in tone from the hopeful vision that Katie Britt is going to put out there, compared with what I heard earlier in your interview with the Biden administration, which their only strategy is just to scare everybody about Republicans, right? Because they can't run on really any accomplishments. So they're just going to talk really fast, be really aggressive. There's so much nervous energy coming from the Biden team. It kind of makes me sit back and laugh. You only have that kind of nervous energy when you're not confident in your candidate.
Morgan Ortegas, we'll leave it there. We'll talk to you soon. Hopefully see you sooner. Morgan, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Yep. I wonder what both of you make of Katie Britt.
I think it's a smart move.
It is a smart move.
Because the first goal of the response speech is get people to watch. And so a lot of people will tune in to say, who is this fresh face? And she really has to deliver the standard Republican agenda and do the non-Trump, non-election denialism thing and talk about what Republicans have to offer.
But I love Morgan. I will say that I thought the White House had confidence, so I didn't see what she saw. The other thing is the generational difference. Absolutely. But Katie Britt, she was a congressional staffer, so she's actually been on the Hill for a long time. I'm not sure how much she's at Publix in Alabama.
I think these positions...
Well, a lot of people don't know that.
I think these positions are baked in. I don't think the response is going to be, as Chris would say, are going to be very differential or differential in any way. I do think this, though. She can't run from Trump. He's going to be their nominee. And that's we haven't talked about the problems the GOP has with nominating Donald Trump to run against Joe Biden, given the criminal investigations or prosecutions that are coming up. And that $2 million he raised, well, he's going to need it for lawyers.
They need to catch up too.
Exactly.
If a Democratic Socialist took over my party, I would not come to the table. So I'm not sure about all these Nikki Haley people coming in for Trump.
All right. Well, still much more ahead here on the Hill.
Either.
Still much more ahead here on the Hill. Remember how George Santos showed up at the State of the Union last year? Certainly raised a lot of questions whether it was appropriate for him to go. Well, should a federally charged senator, in this case Bob Menendez, show up at the State of the Union tonight? The DOJ says the sitting senator should be viewed as a foreign agent. What his office is telling us, and in our inbox just moments ago, news on the senator and his political future. That's on the other side of the break. And that got Ashley's attention.
I know.
Ashley's like, what's the news? I'll tell you. Stick around. What's it like to be alongside the president leading up to the State of the Union? Mulvaney knows all about it. Hot Mic with Mick on the other side of the break. You're watching The Hill. Stay with us. Welcome back. So, less than 3 hours away from President Biden's final State of the Union speech. And this is what is happening outside the White House. Look at that. Right now, there are pro-Palestinian protesters happening ahead of the address. Our NewsNation cameras witnessed an arrest during the protest. A driver revved his engine in the direction of the protesters. Then police pulled him out of the car, as you might imagine, a big police scene outside of the White House. All right, well, when Congress gets together, there can be some tense moments. Remember last year when the former New York Congressman George Santos, the Utah Senator Mitt Romney were caught trading words there on the House floor. Romney reportedly telling Santos he shouldn't be there following his federal indictment and House Ethics Committee report. Now let's look ahead to tonight, just a year later. What about Senator Bob Menendez being there, the Democrat from New Jersey? For example, Tuesday, earlier this week, Menendez was charged with obstruction of justice in a new 18-count indictment. Of course, prosecutors have been rolling out charges against him for quite some time now. I remember, Lauren, when this was a big story last year about George Santos showing up. Why is Menendez going tonight?
I just learned it was 18 counts. I thought it was 12. That's even worse. I mean,
it's a lot.
We will talk about this no matter what is the thing, because the charges are so extreme. It's bribery, obstruction of justice.
The Department of Justice says he should have registered as a foreign agent, which is saying a sitting senator is essentially a
very, very scary. But if it's an empty seat, people will talk about Menendez. If he's there, and he probably will be, because it might be his last State of the Union ever, they're going to talk about
more than half of the Democrats.
He's got every right to be there.
Oh, God.
As he walks on the Senate floor.
You don't think so?
Hold on. He has every right to be there as he walks on the Senate, no matter whether he's charged, indicted, whatever he's gone through. Under the Constitution, he is still an innocent person. Still an innocent person. He has all the rights and privileges of any other senator. So how dare
if you were his attorney, hold on one second. So if you were his attorney, you would make the case that he has the right to, and you would be 100% correct.
I don't have to be his lawyer for that.
But here's what I want to ask you.
He has every right to go to the Senate.
He has every right to be there.
That's right.
Should he be there?
Should he be there? That's a political decision for him to make. But he's an innocent person. Why shouldn't he go?
I'm sorry.
I jumped in on you, but go.
Here's what I would say. This guy, Democrats know, more than half of the Democrats that he's in Senate with have said he needs to resign.
That's their opinion.
When he goes tonight, I guarantee you someone like John Fetterman would be very happy to pull the same thing that Mitt Romney did, because he has disgraced the office. He has made himself a massive story. I'm sorry.
And
he's got gold bars. He's got gold bars and a Mercedes and his house.
He hasn't been proven guilty.
I just want to note that these are two Democrats.
By the way, he was charged prior. He was charged prior to this. He had prior charges, and he beat those charges.
He does not deserve.
Hold on.
I want to completely, because I don't want to get
I'm going to walk in there with him. I'm right here to write
He'll be happy to
So to be clear, hold on, time out. Yeah. To be clear, these are two Democrats disagreeing with each other on the issue, and hence part of the problem, I guess, for Democrats on this.
Well, you're saying a legal issue, and you're not. But can we just not let's not give Menendez any more airtime for a second?
Seriously.
The reason what you started this with that Palestinian thing at the White House, that is why he's talking about Gaza tonight, and because of the port, right there.
By the way, New York Post is reporting that Menendez will not run for re-election. That is a New York Post report at this time. Senator Menendez was asked about this earlier today. Would he run for re-election again? He did not respond. NewsNation has not independently confirmed, though we have reaching out to his office. And by the way, I should add, we reached out to his office, Menendez's office, asking why he would be going tonight, if he is, and what's the reason behind it. All right. Well, as we count down to President Biden's third State of the Union speech, let's turn to someone who knows exactly what it is like to prepare for the thing. Time now for, drum roll, Hot Mic with Mick. Mulvaney, you, of course, were the White House Chief of Staff during 2 of Donald Trump's speeches. You were also in the room for 10 of these things as a congressman. I'll get to that in a second, but let's break this up a couple different ways. Day of at the White House, which is right now for Joe Biden. What's it like for the president and his top staff around him? What are they doing?
You know, day of is really not as big a deal as people would realize. Keep in mind that the men, and they've all been men up to this point, who deliver these speeches, do this for a living. Giving a speech to a joint session of Congress is par for the course. It's part of the job. So you never saw Donald Trump getting worked up. Our team never got worked up. I mean, he gave speeches all of the time, and so does Joe Biden. a lot of the work and a lot of the tension, a lot of the pressure goes in weeks and weeks before. Like it will take at least 6-8 weeks to write one of these things. They go through dozens of different revisions.
How many writers?
How many writers? You got a head speech writer and probably the chief of staff are the two people most responsible for it. And there's negotiations within the entire administration over how many lines in the speech each topic will get. I'm not making that up. The count of how many times you talk about Gaza, how many lines you talk about the border, et cetera. So all of that work, all of that tension goes in before tonight. Tonight is just showtime, and this is what these folks are professionals at.
Okay, so speech 9 o'clock, give or take Eastern time, which means the president normally leaves the White House, 8:15, 8:30, somewhere in there. So then he gets in the Beast, the presidential limo, heads on down Pennsylvania Avenue, 16 blocks, give or take, makes his way into the Capitol. And what happens next?
Yeah, he doesn't have to worry much about traffic, as you can imagine.
Nope.
Given the fact that the Republicans are in charge of the House, he'll probably be in Hakeem Jeffries' office for a while, just waiting for the formalities. Again, this is not a high pressure time for the president and his team. They're going to be nervous. Keep in mind what they'll be watching, and I think it was actually Scott who mentioned this earlier. He's absolutely right. What he says tonight really doesn't matter. It's how he looks and how he makes people feel. People are not going to remember what he says about the border. They're not going to remember what he says about Gaza. They're going to remember how he made them feel as they watch the speech. And again, this is the one time, I disagreed with you, Blake, actually, about this before, that people are not, this is the one time that ordinary human beings actually follow politics. So these are the folks that they're not going to watch on YouTube. They're going to tune in live. 50 million people may watch this speech tonight.
All right, so that's your chief of staff hat. You were in the room 10 times as a congressman. What's that like when you get in and the jockeying for the seats and how all that works?
It's just miserable. So they take the temperature down to the low 60s. I'm not making that up. Maybe the high 50s. Keep in mind, this would be the most filled this building will be. The lights are everywhere, and the lights have been up for several days. So it will be a meat locker in this place all day long. There's rules like there are for grade school children on buses about saving seats, and everybody ignores them. Folks will send staffers over to try and reserve seats on the main aisle so that they can shake the hands of the president as he comes in and get on television. So really, life just doesn't change that much after grade school, and this is a great example of it. As you get into this...
No, sorry, go on. I didn't mean to cut you off.
It's just as you get into the speech, the Democrats will be excited and Republicans will be sitting there going, we have to be here. This is miserable. How many times are people going to stand up and applaud for 3 or 4 minutes at a time? The speech runs to about 20 to 30 minutes. It will take an hour to an hour and a half to actually read tonight because of the interruptions. And
then lastly, the designated survivor. How do you figure out who the designated survivor is? What is that decision like?
You know, the one bad thing about being in the cabinet but not being a cabinet secretary, OMB is a member of the cabinet but not a secretary, which means you're not in the line of succession to the presidency, which means you can't be the designated survivor. We all begged to be the designated survivor because that way you don't have to go to the speech. So no, it's a weekend and then somebody locked up someplace safe, watching it on television tonight. It'll probably be Mayorkas, goodness gracious, for all the attention he's probably got.
Okay, Pop Mike with Mick. Mick, appreciate it. Hang around here for a minute.
Mick is right. You don't want to go to the State of the Union when you're working in the White House. You'd rather stay back because there's all of this, even the security, it's the White House Secret Service versus congressional security. Right. There's all sorts of egos when you go to the Capitol. But I did talk to the White House earlier today, and they are actually looking at this more like State of the Union month. So yes, what he says tonight is important, but they're actually sending all their surrogates out to various states after this. And so I'm afraid that none of them are getting off the hook this time. They're going on the road.
And real quick,
it's very normal. That's what happens, right?
You helped prep George W. Bush for the speech before all of Congress right after 9/11.
Well, it was a joint thing, and I wouldn't say I helped prep him because it was
you were involved.
Yeah.
You were involved.
But he, and that was when he was announcing the first White House Office of Homeland Security. So Tom Ridge was down, and it was when the country was, absolutely still in shock of what happened. So and we'll talk about it in a little bit. And then his next one was when he did the Axis of Evil.
Yep. Other side.
And then really, to be honest with you, they're not fun
No, they're not.
That was fun because it was a
There's
different
all these
time.
events in Washington, and you see the headlines and you see people going to them. Here's a little secret. These big events, sometimes people don't want to go to them, but they have to.
You're all
inside
jaded.
the
You're all
bubble.
jaded.
That's what people say. Oh, you're so jaded. No, we just sometimes don't want to go. All right, coming up. It was 1995 when former President Bill Clinton said this.
It is wrong and ultimately self-defeating for a nation of immigrants to permit the kind of abuse of our immigration laws we have seen in recent years.
So, would President Biden say anything close to that later tonight? We'll see. As you are looking live at Capitol Hill, where in 2 hours and 17 minutes or so, the Commander-in-Chief speaks before the nation's State of the Union address. You're watching The Hill here on NewsNation. We have the post coverage, by the way. Stay with us. 1995, second State of the Union address for him, and he was delivering it in front of a Congress controlled by Republicans for the first time since '54. Here was Clinton on immigration.
We are a nation of immigrants, but we are also a nation of laws. It is wrong and ultimately self-defeating for a nation of immigrants to permit the kind of abuse of our immigration laws we have seen in recent years, and we must do more to stop it.
I don't think we're hearing that from Joe Biden tonight.
Every president has called for comprehensive immigration reform, though, and it has been since Bill Clinton that we have not, even before that, we have not had any immigration reform to our system, and it's to our own detriment because we should be bringing in talented and skilled people to add to the economy.
We must do more to stop it, though. I think that's sort of the difference from
And that
from
he
then and
acknowledged
now.
that it was illegal.
Well, but that's what Biden's trying to do in trying to expedite asylum cases so that people aren't just hanging out in the United States without any repercussions for so long.
The problem is the Democratic Party is tearing itself apart between the progressives and the moderates. Progressives who really believe we should have open border policies and think the common sense reforms are racist, as Ayanna Pressley has said, and moderates who want to shut the border down. I mean, how do you bring those two factions together and give a cohesive speech? It's really a big challenge.
Not exactly correct, though. Close, but not exactly.
What part?
Because if you pass the bill, the bipartisan bill, you get some of that, you get a lot of that, if you will. You've got companies in this country who recruit immigrants, right? You've got to give them a path to citizenship because our economy literally relies on...
So you have advised Democrats to vote
You
against
certainly
it?
do. The economy would fail if you didn't have immigration.
I have multiple people in my ear telling me Mulvaney is shaking his head.
Okay.
Mick, what's going on?
Let's see.
It's true.
Where to begin? Immigration is probably the hardest issue we face. Go back. It's not lost on me that the Democrats controlled the House, the White House, and the Senate with 60 votes. Filibuster proof, and we're not able to get a deal on immigration. It's really, really hard, and it's not going to be fixed by this bipartisan bill. You mind the bipartisan bill it gives more money for asylum judges. Yes, to Republicans, that means you're simply going to let more people in faster. This is a really tough thing. I would be curious to see what the president says tonight that speaks to ordinary Americans.
Mick, it also limits, though, you got to concede this, it limits the number of people that could come in on an average basis, and it gives the president power, right, power to shut down the border at certain limits, and he can shut it down any time. He said, if you pass this bill, I'll shut the border down. Quote.
No, I don't remember what he said. I know the bill said that he will have the ability to shut it down at 4,000 or 5,000 a day on average. That's
a big drop from what the Republicans' talking points are and what we're seeing on the media. It's something.
By the way, last 5 days, according to the reporting of Ali Bradley, or at least the most recent 5 days, 7,000 per day down at the southern border.
Mick, you have to start somewhere, though. You have to start somewhere, and that's my question to Mick, is we're the closest that we've ever been at this moment. And yes, I agree. We need to have qualified, we need to have people who have skills come to this country. We need to reform altogether. But first, we've got to start with, right now, it's 7 years that these people are waiting for asylum.
We're not, I get it, but we're not close.
Well, look, I agree with Johanna about the importance of legal immigration, if that's the point he's trying to make. But I think it's fair to say as a Republican, wait a second. So you want us to work with folks whose very first days in office, they undid all of the Trump immigration policy and cheered about it, told people they were going to do it, said, look, elect us and we'll undo all of the Trump immigration policies. That's really hard.
Because
deal.
So I want you to see this 4-box, and then can we get a wide shot real quick of the table? This whole crew will be back after President Biden speaks later tonight.
Can we talk about immigration?
We'll talk about immigration
Yes, exactly.
after
We
President
have
Biden
more to say
speaks.
about it.
At about, 10:15, 10:20 or so, you will see this whole crew, and I'm sure we will talk about immigration then. Mulvaney, thank you. We'll catch you later tonight. Thank you all. You're not going anywhere. We ordered in dinner. Other side of the break, will there be a sort of a moment potentially for the House Speaker Mike Johnson? Remember, this is the first time that he'll be before a national audience. You get the Vice President and the House Speaker behind President Biden tonight. So what might we expect from Mike Johnson? Leland Vittert joins me on the other side of the break. We're not done yet. More Hill when the Hill returns.
NewsNation tonight, a crucial night for President Biden. With his presidency on the line, can he make his case to the American people? Cuomo and the best political team anywhere break it all down. The State of the Union. Special live coverage tonight on NewsNation.
Doubts it. Contact my office. I'll give you a copy.
Oh, never mind. All right, welcome back to the Hill. That, of course, was Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, Republican from Georgia, heckling President Biden last year. The newly elected speaker doesn't want a repeat, of course. It's the first time for Mike Johnson in this role. Consider the headline here. Speaker Johnson urging Republican lawmakers to maintain decorum at the State of the Union. Leland Vittert, host of On Balance. What's at stake for him?
Maintaining decorum requires maintaining control of his caucus, which he has not been able to do so far. Okay,
No.
He's got a 2-seat majority. It's hard.
How do you maintain control of 215 people, or whatever the number is?
Try herding cats. Look, I think what's interesting is Mike Johnson is a institutionalist. He's a man sort of deep regard for the process and for the office of president and the like. And I think we've seen that. I think we know he's told his caucus to hold the line and to set an example and on and on and on. Now, that's not going to happen. Marjorie Taylor Greene already said, I'm not going to. I think what's interesting to watch is what happens from the left. Because this is the first time we may see a president heckled by his own party.
And we've seen protests, that incident outside of the White House.
Yeah, one already arrested. Today. We're actually already even hearing now.
I don't know if
sirens
you
right
could hear
outside,
that too, right? I'm not going nuts. There's sirens outside.
Sirens outside, and there's big protests right now in front of the Capitol.
All right. What do you got coming up tonight?
We're going to be talking to George Will. We've got Mike Huckabee on, a couple of others, also some bets that are being placed now. You can wager on what will and will not be said at State of the Union. The big show, though, is coming up afterwards. Congratulations on the post show.
Thank you.